A search and rescue diver drops into the North Atlantic. 40-foot swells. Water the color of old iron. Wreckage scattered across miles of open ocean. Every second matters because the flight recorder, the one device that can explain what killed everyone on that plane, is somewhere below him. And according to its official name, he's searching for a black box. It looks like a catastrophic naming failure. But here's the surprising truth. There is no black box. There never was. The name outlasted the technology it described by decades, and the device it refers to was redesigned, from the shell outward, with one near-obsessive goal: to be found. Today, we're uncovering the mystery of the flight recorder's color, how the science of human vision and crash physics shaped its every design choice, and why an industry this serious about precision still calls its most important tool by entirely the wrong name. To understand the flight recorder, we first have to look at what happened before it. The early jet age was, to put it plainly, a killing field. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, crashes happened with terrifying regularity and almost no explanation. Investigators would arrive at the wreckage and find nothing useful. Metal, luggage, silence. No record of what the pilots said in their final minutes. No log of instrument readings. No way to separate mechanical failure from human error. Every crash was a closed-case mystery, and the families left behind rarely got answers. One of those families belonged to a boy named David Warren. When Warren was around 9 years old, his father was killed in one of Australia's first commercial airline disasters. Decades later, Warren became an aeronautical researcher, and in 1953, at the Aeronautical Research Laboratories in Melbourne, he began building a device to record cockpit voices and instrument data during flight. He wasn't developing a product. He was answering the question that had haunted him since childhood. His early prototypes used magnetic wire recording and a dark painted metal casing, functional, utilitarian, and completely unremarkable to look at. That dark shell, chosen for heat tolerance rather than any deliberate aesthetic reason, planted a seed in the public's mind that would prove almost impossible to uproot. The problem was never just capturing the data. It was surviving long enough to hand it over. Most people assume the bright color on a modern flight recorder is simple safety logic, the same thinking as a high-visibility vest or a traffic cone. Paint it bright, find it faster. Obvious. And that's not wrong, exactly. But it wildly undersells what's actually happening. The color isn't just bright. It's a specific shade called international orange, a color you've seen on the Golden Gate Bridge, on NASA spacesuits, on Arctic survival suits. It sits at a precise point in the visible spectrum, wavelengths long enough to cut through haze and low light, saturation deep enough to punch, against the two environments where most crash wreckage ends up, blue-gray ocean and green-brown earth. But here's what most people miss. The orange on a flight recorder is not the same orange as the Golden Gate Bridge. The bridge uses one standard. Aviation uses a distinct formulation. Federal Standard 595, color chip 12197, international orange, that skews slightly more red-orange. It was tuned specifically for contrast against blue water rather than gray coastal fog. The designers weren't picking a color they liked. They were solving a precise optical problem for a precise environment. But if that's all this is, color theory and contrast ratios, why don't we apply the same logic to every critical component on a plane? Because the color is only one layer of the system, and understanding the others requires opening the box a little. Think of human vision like a radio receiver that doesn't pick up all frequencies equally. Our eyes evolved in forests and grasslands, calibrated for motion and contrast in green-yellow environments. Blue-orange contrast is one of the most neurologically forceful combinations our visual system encounters. It's why sports teams use it, why emergency signage leans on it, and why you can spot an orange life ring against dark water almost instantaneously, even when you're exhausted, hypothermic, and scanning from a lurching helicopter. International orange doesn't ask your brain to notice it. It forces your brain to notice it before conscious thought even catches up. That covers the surface search, but a recorder lost in deep water can't be seen at all. So it carries a second, entirely separate system, an underwater locator beacon that emits an acoustic ping at 37.5 kHz for up to 30 days after submersion. Color gets rescuers to the right debris field. The ping navigates them to the exact device. Two different search problems, two different solutions working in sequence. And here's the part that tends to surprise people. The recorder itself is deliberately not aerodynamic. It's a rounded rectangular brick. That shape isn't laziness, it's engineered so that in a crash, the device tumbles away from the fuselage rather than staying embedded where fire and crushing forces are most concentrated. Color, shape, beacon, none of it is cosmetic. Every choice is an answer to a different version of the same question. What kills the evidence? And here's the weirdest part. The word black and black box has nothing to do with color at all. The term predates aviation by decades. In engineering systems theory, a black box is any component whose internal workings you don't see. Inputs go in, outputs come out, and the mechanism inside is opaque. It's conceptual, not visual. When 1950s aviation adopted the phrase, they meant, this is a sealed, tamper-resistant unit that investigators interact with from the outside. The black referred to opacity and authority, not to paint. So why hasn't the industry simply renamed it, decades after the devices turned bright orange? This is where the money and legal angle enter, and it's more revealing than the color science. Renaming the flight recorder would have meant recertifying documentation across dozens of aviation regulatory bodies worldwide, rewriting sections of international ICAO treaties, and updating thousands of maintenance manuals in multiple languages. The FAA, ICAO, and their national equivalents looked at that cost and made a rational, if maddening, economic calculation. The confusion created by the wrong name was cheaper than the paperwork required to correct it. And this is where it gets interesting. That decision may have had real consequences. When Air France Flight 447 went down over the South Atlantic in 2009, it took 2 years and 3 separate expeditions to recover the recorders. Journalists consistently called them black boxes. The public pictured dark objects in dark water. The cognitive gap between the name and the bright orange. Narratives shape funding. But here is narratives shape funding. But here is where it gets complicated. Despite the orange paint, the acoustic beacon, and the engineered brick shape, flight recorders are still regularly lost. The MH370 disappearance in 2014 broke the entire framework. The Underwater Locator Beacon on that aircraft was rated for 30 days. The search didn't reach the probable crash zone until after that window had already closed. The orange color was irrelevant 3 kilometers down in the southern Indian Ocean. The acoustic ping had gone silent. The findable device had become unfindable, not because the engineering failed, but because the system was designed around the average disaster. MH370 was not an average disaster. This exposed something the aviation world had quietly known for years. The 30-day battery life, standardized in the 1970s, had never kept pace with the growth of transoceanic routes over the most remote stretches of ocean on Earth. Longer batteries add weight, cost more, and require regulatory recertification. For decades, the incentive to change was weaker than the institutional inertia to leave things alone. After MH370, the industry began a serious movement towards something a previous generation would have called science fiction. Streaming core flight data continuously via satellite to ground stations as the plane flies. Not recording, transmitting, in real time, which means the location of a crashed aircraft would be known within minutes, and the physical recorder becomes a backup for data detail, not a primary means of knowing where the plane is. The bright orange box that David Warren built to survive the unsurvivable may eventually be superseded by a system that makes the box's survival irrelevant. Next time you see a battered orange cylinder lifted from wreckage on a news screen, don't see a piece of bureaucratic hardware. See 60 years of accumulated grief, ingenuity, and compromise. The boy who lost his father and spent a career answering a question no one else was asking. The color scientists who studied how human eyes fail under stress. The engineers who shaped a box to tumble away from fire. The regulators who chose paperwork, inertia, over a sensible rename, and the searchers who learned the hardest possible way, where all of it runs out. Every design choice is a compressed argument about what failure looks like and what survival costs. The color isn't decoration, it's a hypothesis about the worst day imaginable, and how to make it slightly less final. If you like understanding how the world really works, the physics, the economics, the quiet human history baked into objects you've walked past 1,000 times, hit like and subscribe for more. That diver in the North Atlantic wasn't looking for a black box. He never was.